Sometimes I say on or upon and stuff a little bit. All right, in unison. We'll now these things happen to them
as example,
written down for our
instruction
on whom
the end of ages has come.
Yeah, it's a little rough. I think you guys all have it, but Jason, you want to go for it alone?
Yeah, there's one part that always messes me up. But yeah, I did have it at some point.
Now these
Things
things
happen to them as examples for us, down for our instruction.
Yeah, almost
More or less.
yeah, very close. Nice. All right. Gonna have Trent. You get to go to the board. Get put on the spot. Make you study hard that way. And we'll maybe. So you can write out the land of Palestine. You can erase everything that's on there, and we'll help you out with whatever help you need.
I don't have these syllabus.
This is just reviewing stuff. Oh, it's all online. I can send that out to you.
Where I look at my email?
Yeah, I'll make sure everyone has that again.
The land of Palestine being that the map you gave us with all the different people groups in the different areas.
Yeah,
different towns.
whatever geographic features you can think to put on there, or peoples that where they go, rivers, that sort of thing. I know.
I just looked over.
I got that from Paul, looking for ways to be a little cooler on Sunday mornings. It's really loud. But I don't know where to put it for sure to move air without it being like excessively loud. Maybe before the service, just to. Good so far. Nicely done.
Is that right?
No.
No, it's not. I didn't think it was. The Red Sea is right here, right?
No, the Red Sea is actually quite a bit south of there.
Oh,
I don't think it would make that map.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure the exact location of it.
Closer to Egypt.
Yeah, yep, they crossed the Red Sea.
Okay. I remember the one.
Yeah.
The descendants of Esau. It's right here.
Yep,
Ammonites.
Yep. What? Not the
Edomites.
Edomites. Yeah, there you go. You got it. Nicely done. What sea is that? I think Jason said it.
Is it Sea of Galilee?
Yeah, the Sea of Galilee. What are some alternative names for the Sea of Galilee?
Tiberias?
Yeah, Tiberias. Also, I remember, there's one more I remember. Kinnereth.
Lake of Tiberias?
Lake of Tiberias, well done. And yeah, it's actually not a sea, it is a lake. So Sea of Galilee is a bit of a misnomer. No, that's right. That's what it's called.
Yeah. And that's not Galilee.
That's
embarrassing.
Yeah.
You know, I had to look up when does a pond become a lake. You know, it's like over 2 acres. Anyway, it's neither here nor there.
That's next week.
Yeah, right. Because everybody, I moved to Kentucky, and people are like calling everything's lakes. I'm like, I know lakes. And I looked it up. I was like, technically.
You see what they call lakes in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Everything. So since it's Palestine, would I be able to draw like the tribes of Israel? Is that what we're looking for here?
No, but
Yeah,
if you
I
know
didn't-
them, you go for it. That's a tough sledding. I wouldn't be very good at that.
No, I just know the 3 on that side.
Yeah. What else do you guys remember? Help trend.
I can't.
That's really good.
I don't want to draw dots for like Bethlehem and Jerusalem because I can't remember.
Yeah,
where
I
they
mean,
should
if
be.
you knew where they were, I don't know where they are. It'd be great to get that nailed too, but.
The Philistines are along the sea.
Yeah, southwest coast.
Okay.
Yep, that's good. Something we haven't talked about yet, but since we're in Judges, we're getting into Philistine territory.
Yeah, nice spelling.
So to kind of get a feel for the Canaanites or the opposition on to the whatever side that is the east of the Jordan, I always think of Same, Syria, Ammon, Moab, Edom.
Ooh, that's a
going down. So Syria is kind of north of the Sea of Galilee, and the Ammonites and the Moabites and the Edomites. You know, you already have the Edomites on there, but that was the acrostic that's always helped me to kind of remember the sort of those folks that are always kind of haranguing them.
So you can put the S, north of the Sea of Galilee, Syria.
Yeah, it's a little bit north of there, yeah.
Oh, that's gonna change my life. I'm like, Ammonites or Moabites now? That's really cool.
And this is the A with the Ammonites?
Ammon, yeah, or Ammonites, yep.
And that's the other one from Esau?
Or
is that Lot's daughters?
Lot. Yep.
Yeah.
It'd be 2 M's just for reference. I mean, I don't care that much about spelling, but since there's also Amnon, son of David, gets.
Sorry, Zach, if you can't read it, I'm using a pretty fine marker.
It's okay.
Zach, who did the Moabites descend from?
Oh gosh, that was lots, right?
Yeah, yep. Both the Moabites and the Ammonites are Lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what do we call that area east of the Jordan River? You guys remember?
Promised Land.
No.
That's what I was thinking.
That's west, yeah.
Yep, west of the Jordan would be the Promised Land. There we go. This is getting good. My life is really being changed now.
Got froze. Principal told me to look at it. They gave me swatch.
Yeah. Jackson got it. That's the Transjordan, is the area east of the Jordan. East. That's west. East.
Oh, wow, yeah.
You're the one that made the compass.
Yeah.
Yeah, east. And so that means, beyond the Jordan, or across the Jordan. So, that would be from the perspective of the Promised Land. That's the Transjordanian region. And let's see.
That's the side that they come in from when they come in to conquer the land. They're coming in, they come up around this side of the Dead Sea. And so Jericho is just on the other side, about halfway down there. Jericho is just on the other side of the Jordan.
Right.
Somewhere up there, yeah.
Nice.
Is that worth right?
Yeah, I don't know where it is precisely, so trust in Ryan on this one. But
Oh, man, there's an H in there.
H, yeah. H-O.
Oh.
C-H-O. And the Amorites, they don't always make every map, and some of these, but they're east, kind of like sometimes they get written on the maps like here. I don't really know their relationship to the Moabites and the Ammonites, but you remember the 2 kings that the 2 great Amorite kings that they defeated before they went into the Promised Land?
Og, and he was the fat one, right? Or he was the big guy.
The giant, yeah. Og with the giant bed, the steel bed.
Yeah.
And who remembers the other one? Jackson, you got it?
Sihon.
Yeah, Sihon. Og and Sihon. So you'll want to remember them because they get mentioned 40 times in the Bible. They're a big deal, not to us, but they probably should be a bigger deal to us. So they had 60 walled cities, plus lots of other cities besides. And so, that's a pretty big deal. The walled cities a big deal. And the Israelites, remember, they it wasn't their first battle, but these are their first major victories. And so this is the Lord preparing them to go into the Promised Land. He's giving them some victories to give them confidence. And so, yeah, kings of the Amorites, Og of Bashan and Sihon of Heshbon, 2 regions, in the Amorite lands. But what else do you guys have that should go on the map?
Should be a bunch in this area, shouldn't there be?
I don't know what you put there. I don't have all the Hittites and Perizzites memorized where all of those are. But the Philistines, remember the 5, well, we haven't even talked about this yet, but the Philistines were governed by 5 cities. That was the way their structure was. So the rulers of each of those cities, were like the rulers of the nation of Philistia. So we call those city-states. Anybody know, we haven't talked about it, but know any of the 5 city-states? These are ones that you'll have to have memorized. They'll give you lots of confidence because they're going to show up a ton in the book of Judges and later too, First Samuel.
Is Gath one?
Yeah, Gath is one of them. And I don't know where exactly, and they're going to be along the coast, but you can do it just like that. Yeah, Gath, Goliath of Gath, yep. Ekron is one of them. And Ryan, do you have a sweet acronym for these?
I used to, if I see them all, I might come up with it.
Yeah, it seemed like you had something. Yeah, Gaza.
I did, yeah.
Gaza is one of them.
Is there any C in Ekron, or is it just EK?
Ekron is no C. Ashkelon. And then Ashdod. So definitely work on those, see if you can get them down. What else do we have? The Amalekites are going to be to the west of the Edomites. And if you remember,
The Amalekites, is it?
Amalekites. Remember the battle with the Amalekites? It's kind of a big deal for Israel. Remember that one, Jason?
I do, but I don't right now.
Zach, remember the battle with the Amalekites at Rephidim? Maybe that'll jog your memory.
I feel like Jason today too.
Yeah, well, that's when Moses raised his hands and the Israelites got victory, and then they didn't win when he let them down. And so, which 2 guys held up his hands?
Aaron and Hur.
Aaron and Hur. My kids always laugh at that. His name's Hur.
You ever heard of Ben Hur?
Right. Yeah. You could put Sidon to the north along the coast there of Tyre. To the north.
We need to know where the Amalekites, where they're descended from.
I don't know it, so you don't have to know it. If I discover it, then you'll have to know it.
Oh,
That's how that works.
Right. Ryan, you don't know anything about that. I don't think the Bible probably tells us, but do you remember, anyone remember the important dude? He was a friend of Solomon's that was from Tyre. If you were paying attention in the sermon when we went through First Kings.
Oh man, that was the one time I was thinking.
His name's Hiram. Hiram, Hiram, Hiram of Tyre. The ruler there, he's friends with Solomon. And so he provided a lot of the lumber for the temple because, they were a merchant city. Well, they had lumber for one, but they were a major merchant city on the Mediterranean. And so, they just were really, really wealthy and had come to rule a larger area than just their city. So really, really prominent towns, Tyre and Sidon.
Sidon is a town.
Yeah, yep, along the coast.
I better draw a dot.
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. How about the rivers that are tributaries into the Jordan? You guys remember any of those? We touched on them last week. They're going to show up in various places, like when the Ephraimites, I think it's the Gileadites that
Did it come like
Are
that?
some
They're
of the
killing
ones listed in
Ephraimites.
like Genesis 1 and 2 and stuff?
No, those are the headwaters of I don't know. The Euphrates, I think.
Does it come like here?
They're gonna go eastward. So the first one is Yarmouk. Yeah, good enough. Second one is Jabbok. Yeah. You think of Jacob. He crosses the Jabbok and then he wrestles with God.
BBOK.
Yeah. And then the one below that, anyone know it? Ryan, remember this one?
Is it carrot?
No, I wouldn't remember it probably unless I looked it up, but Arnon. What did you say?
Kerith, isn't the Kerith or Cherith one of them?
I don't know.
I think,
That's a river, I'm
Probably.
pretty sure.
isn't that the one that,
CHER?
that Elijah got? Well, I'm pretty sure it's on there somewhere,
Probably.
I didn't know the name for
but
it.
maybe I'm not sure. That's the one.
I like things to be readable.
Yeah, this is a beautiful map, by the way. That's good.
It's looking great.
Pretty awesome, man.
You guys remember that's about covered, the important ones. I thought if you get these mastered, you've done pretty well. But do you guys remember the region of the Negev or Negeb?
I remember that name.
Anyone, you remember where it's
I don't
at,
like
Jackson?
It's on Egypt and Israel land.
Yeah.
Triangle.
Yeah, it's shaped like it's a region. It probably is even a little lower than what your map shows. But it's a part of the promised land, but it's like a wedge, and it's dry, really dry. I looked at it on Google Earth today, and I mean, it's just really deserty. There's not very many towns there.
Which of the tribes of Israel settled there?
The Judah and Simeon perhaps was a bit in the Negev. That's where the patriarchs spent most of their time in the Negev. Especially Isaac. I think Isaac spent his whole life there.
Is that where the tombs of oh, never mind. I was trying to think of where they buried like Jacob, and they bought the field from that guy for the.
Yeah, what guy? remember Ross's mnemonic for that? Zach. I hardly know who the guy is, but Zach Efron.
Oh.
So, he bought the field of Machpelah from Ephron. Abraham did to bury Sarah, and I guess then the patriarchs.
Yeah, where was that? That wasn't in the Negev, was it?
There's someone down there.
I don't know. But I like when you ask questions like that.
So where was it before? Where did they live before they went to Egypt to Joseph?
Where did the patriarchs live?
Yeah, before they went to Egypt.
Yeah, they let's see, they were from Haran. I believe they traveled to the promised land, and then famine hit, and so they went to Egypt, and then traveled back to the promised land, probably into the Negev. I think they were in the Negev.
Hebron and Mamre, where the oaks of Mamre are, Abram's belong. They're pretty much dead west of the Dead Sea, right smack dab in the middle of it. So kind of like, east or no west. Yep.
So they were kind
Right,
of
right out there. Yeah, right there. Up there. There you go.
That's where Abraham was.
Mamre and Hebron, real close right there. Beersheba is down south a little way. And then, has Andy mentioned the one from Dan to Beersheba yet?
Not yet.
That's what I would always think of.
You can talk about that though. I mean, I don't have to ask so much.
Beersheba is kind of right, kind of level with the southernmost tip of the Dead Sea. And then Dan is way up north of the Sea of Galilee even a little bit. And so then that kind of is a euphemism for the whole of the promised land from Dan to Beersheba.
So yeah, like when I think that maybe it gets used a bunch of times, but like for instance, I think it gets used here like when the concubine gets cut up at the end of Judges, and her parts are sent from Dan to Beersheba, sent everywhere in the promised land. Or if you think about where the northern kingdom, when Jeroboam broke away, he built 2 altars, 2 temples, 2 shrines, and he placed them in what 2 cities?
Dan and Beersheba.
Not Dan and Beersheba, because he's just in the northern kingdom now.
Oh.
But Dan and Bethel. And Bethel was like right on the border of the northern and southern kingdom, and so he's placing one way up north and one way south of the northern kingdom. So Dan became a prominent city.
I'm excited to get my mind wrapped around the upper and lower kingdoms, figure out how I know.
Yeah, I'm excited to get there too. There's so much that we I was kind of hoping to have gotten to by now, but we haven't. All right, nice job. Jason, you want to go up and map out the tabernacle for us?
Sure.
I closed the book real fast in case you were going to glance at it.
That sucks.
We'll help you out though.
None of this stuff have I practiced since last week. I only did the required reading and read the Bible and my assignment, so.
What are the other two?
The two A's, Ashdod and Ashkelon. Lyle?
Yeah.
You wouldn't be happy without a Slim Jim, would you?
Are you guys gonna let me draw
He's gonna-
all 60 holes around the
Yes.
camp?
No, it can be pretty, a pretty rudimentary drawing.
It's a
It's a little mini.
It's small. This is my Father's Day loot. I kind of figured it's a little bit too much junk food, the gummy worms and the sticks for me to eat, so.
I didn't get any, so I'll help you out.
Here.
something like that. I don't know, somewhere in there. Let's see here.
I love the horns of the
Yeah.
altar.
Like, what?
That's about as good as you
Where's
can.
the turtle?
Right.
Somebody's trying to
Never mind. Don't tempt me. Okay.
Trent, who, while he's drawing that, who was killed while grasping the horns of the altar?
I remember that.
I don't remember that.
Jason, you want to help him out?
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're kind of hogging everything here, the drawing and the.
I'm a hogger. Let's see here. Let's see here.
Joab,
I don't know how you draw stuff.
commander of David's army.
I'm gonna put in parentheses what this is supposed to be.
Incense thing. Nice, I like it. Let's see where.
How
Yes,
about-
while you watch him suffer.
I know, got the ark in here, we've got some angels up in here.
Now, we talked last week, I mean, those cherubim are like the hardest thing to try to illustrate.
Mine have fly wings. Hopefully that's not irreverent. I feel slightly guilty drawing that. Let's see here.
Jackson, what was a cherubim?
Incense altar, or incense thing.
Yeah, they show up in scripture guarding God's presence. They're in the garden or the war chariot in Ezekiel.
I know what's in the ark. Does that count for anything?
Yeah, for sure. You can illustrate
think.
and draw that. And then,
I think I know what's in. I know, tablets in there.
what else would you need about the cherubim? They were composite creatures, so like in Ezekiel and, they have 4 faces. One would be, various animals like an eagle and, kind of hard to imagine, but.
So 4 faces mean like here, 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 here.
Yeah, yep.
Those are very,
Yeah, seraphim or sephirim, seraphim, yeah. And we don't really know much about those. The Bible doesn't really give us any detail. I think that's only in Isaiah 6 they show up, isn't it, Ryan? Think of anywhere else?
I think that's right.
I think Walton, it says that there's some connection to serpents, and other, ancient Near Eastern depictions, but it seems like sort of a weird depiction in a way from God's creatures, heavenly creatures. But.
what's going on? Man, I had all this stuff down like 2 weeks ago.
No, that's pretty good. What's he missing, guys? Anything?
Can't remember what else was missing.
Yeah, the lampstand,
Yeah, lampstand.
which is called what? Menorah.
Mm.
That's what you're referring to, right?
Yeah. There's a table with the Lord's
Yeah.
food.
Yeah, the bread of presence.
So
Yep. So there's the showbread that was on the bread.
Here?
They've got it on the, what wall is that?
But it's in the holy place?
Yep, in the holy place.
They have the incense right along the curtain, don't they?
Yeah, yep. Yeah, it's all right. It's in, you did pretty well, Jason. The menorah, I mean, a lot of the stuff we don't get a lot of description about what the symbolism was. I know, you know, the menorah resembled almonds, and you know, Walton suggests that it reminds us of the garden and of the presence of the Lord in that way.
Doesn't have anything to do with the.
What you're doing there.
This curtain has cherubim on it. This one doesn't.
Yeah, maybe. I actually have not really ever made that connection. You know anything about that, Ryan?
That's a good.
I think that'd be a fair thing to think through, yeah.
Outside of the holy place, don't they have the wash, like, where you can wash?
That's what I was like confused about.
Yeah. If you got the altar and then the wash basin.
Is that the basin up here, or are they reversed?
No, you had it right, the basin's between the altar and the.
Yeah.
There you go. Watch.
And then when you get to the temple, there's two huge cherubim too, flanking the ark of the covenant. Okay, so you've got the two tablets.
Cherubim.
Yeah, well, there's two huge ones on the side too.
Oh, like up in here?
In the temple, not in the tabernacle, but in the temple. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I had Lauren look that up and clarified that for me.
Is that in the encyclopedia there?
Well, this is the tabernacle. It would be if we found it in the temple. It's just one of the variants. So you got the tablets, the manna, and the staff in the ark.
I think that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, that was a little confusing for me years ago because in some places in Scripture it says only the tablets were in the ark. In some places it says the manna, the jar of manna, and the staff, Aaron's staff that budded, were outside the ark. But there, I think it's in Hebrews. I think in Hebrews the manna and the staff are described as being inside the ark, and so probably they had various things at various times. And sorry, Zach, I know you're missing out on.
We need a red one.
So they had things inside
It's
the
okay.
ark?
Yeah,
The staff or whatever.
yeah, they had the tablets for sure of the Ten Commandments, and then
Okay.
the jar of manna and the staff at some points must have been in there, and at some points must have been beside it, and they maybe lost them at some point, you know, in battle or something like that. Yeah, the mercy seat, the lid of the ark. What's another name for that? The atonement cover.
Yeah. Which separates us from the commandments. It's gospel right there.
Yeah, that's cool. One thing we didn't talk about, and we went through this stuff pretty fast, but you know, the quality of materials. You know, there were like four layers of skins, yeah, and the closer you get to the Holy of Holies, the higher the value. And so there's like gradations of holiness from the holy place to the most holy place, and even in the coverings, you know, they get more and more precious and special the closer it gets.
I always thought, you know, the rings that the poles go through on the ark, it doesn't specify, but like, I'm almost sure it said they're made of solid gold, but solid gold wouldn't hold anything, right? I mean, like, couldn't you just be like,
Bend it.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I always wonder about that because I was like, I don't know.
Well, it's a good question. I don't know.
You know what I
I
mean?
remember them saying it was wood, some type of, they even said the wood. I
The
thought.
rings. I know the poles.
Oh,
Poles, it said, I'm pretty sure. Didn't it?
yeah, that's right.
Maybe they just like assumed it and they're like, oh, let's do the rings too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, you did pretty well, Jason. Nice work. Ryan, anything else that you know about the tabernacle? One thing that we didn't talk about is, it's kind of fun to talk about. You guys have probably heard the analogy before that the high priest would go in once a year to the most holy place, and that they would put a rope around his foot in case he perished while he was in there. They would drag him out. Yes. But well, it gets used a lot, but other people more recently have pointed out that there's no historical evidence for that practice ever happening. No documents or anything like that, and so it's probably just a legend. Actually made it up. Right, blame it. So you probably don't. I've used it before, but Ryan's used it a lot. No, but you probably don't want to use that illustration. It's probably not.
That's helpful.
What's that?
That's helpful. I've heard that too, quite a bit.
Did I just rack a great illustration for you?
I was kind of banking on that.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and they weren't even to look at the Ark of the Covenant, and so when they would move it, they would walk backwards with some kind of covering to cover it up, before they would move it. Yeah. All right. Anything else on the tabernacle? All right. Now it gets really sweet. You guys get. We could get a big quiz for you.
Oh, no. By the way, Ryan, I emailed you about the.
All right, Zach, I better get on my computer and email you some stuff. I don't know if I sent it all to you. Did you get some documents from me?
What documents?
I think I had some handouts that were sent as attachments.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe I sent this quiz to you though.
I probably didn't get it, no.
You didn't get those other attachments either?
Better to do.
I'll send this quick quiz to you. You guys can, again, you're not going to turn this in, so you can abbreviate, whatever helps you to remember it.
Oh man, where'd the bucket of pins go?
Oh, I got one at home. I need to bring them.
Oh, I think they're on the counter there.
What kind of a pen, please? Sorry. Maybe I took them. Got a bunch of them at home. I need to get rid of.
All right, Zach, quiz is coming your way.
Cool, thank you.
Seconds like you did last week.
Give you how much?
I said, don't be giving us no 30 seconds like you did last week. Can't spell my name in 30 seconds.
You gotta go fast.
I'll hurt you, catchphrase.
We already did 1 Corinthians 10:11, so if you hadn't written that down. Did that come through for you, Zach?
Yep.
Awesome. How are you guys doing? Done? Jackson, you done?
Done as I'm getting.
Okay. Fair enough. All right, let's walk through it. Zach, why don't you give us the 4 supposed sources in the documentary hypothesis?
That's the one that I just don't have.
All right, you get to tag somebody.
I tagged Jason.
All right, I got this one. Just don't be asking me any dates. Jehovah's, Elohist, Priestly, Deuteronomist, or something like that.
Nailed it. Deuteronomistic. Yeah.
What was that J one again?
Jehovah's.
Jehovah's.
Yahweh?
They go with Jehovah's. And just, I mean, it was, there were Germans that made it, and so they used J's, but
Sure.
yeah.
I'm sure.
My wife.
Culturally.
All right, Trent, why don't you go with the 3 major Jewish feasts?
Pentecost or Passover, and then Harvest or Feast of Weeks, I think. And then the third one, I always remember Ingathering, but I don't remember the one that you guys all remember.
Yeah, you go with the variants.
Gonna have to work on that one.
All right. Well, Passover is distinct from Pentecost.
Oh.
So we would normally, just for consistency, maybe go Passover, and then Pentecost, and then booths. And then variants of those Passovers connected to the Feast of Unleavened Bread. They're not the same, but they get associated with each other because Passover was the feast that launched the week-long Feast of Unleavened Bread. So it's actually like an 8-day ceremony, 1 week of unleavened bread and with the Passover the day before. But if you just remember Passover and unleavened. Pentecost, you had, I think the Feast of Weeks, because, 7 weeks after Passover, or what's a day? Because Pent, you think of 50, so 50 days after Passover, or 7 weeks. And then Booth is the other variant, is tabernacle, tabernacles. I guess in both cases, they would hastily build shelters made of branches and stuff, and so you can, tabernacle is the same as tent or a booth, and so you can kind of see the association with those words. And then you go with the, you've got to remind me again, the ingathering and what else?
It was at the end of, was that at the very end of Genesis or the very end of Exodus?
I think Exodus, yeah.
And that's just
that goes with booths and tabernacles, though, huh?
Yep.
Okay. All right, for your sake, we can add that in. Lyle, how about the 5 major offerings? You remember any of them? Or all of them?
Grain, sin.
Yeah, nice.
Got 2 of them.
That's good. Well, the one that most people remember, you'll probably think of, the burnt offering.
Burnt up, yeah.
And, that's the one where everything was offered to the Lord. Everything was burned up, except for the skin of the animal, which went to the priest. And of course, they would, take the entrails out and dispose of them.
It's usually the first one I think of, too.
Yeah, burnt. That's the easiest one. Grain and sin, that was good. You got those. What are the other 2 guys? Remember?
Guilt and fellowship.
Yep, guilt and fellowship. Well done. And there were other offerings, minor offerings, wave offering. Somebody, questions you get. Somebody texted me asking what the wave offering was this week. So you sometimes get interesting questions. I don't really know. I think they waved the offering. I don't know the symbolism behind it. But it'll be sweet when people ask you those sorts of questions and you have an answer. That'll win you some credibility. Jackson, 10 Commandments in order.
Okay. Other gods before me, no carved images. Should not take the Lord name in vain. Under the Sabbath. Murder. Should not commit adultery. Shall not steal. Shall not bear false witness.
You actually, you conveniently missed number 5. And on 2 days after Father's Day, no less. I bet you didn't even get a gift for Louis, did you?
Yeah. Honor father.
Yeah, yep. Honor father and mother. And then, did you have, do not covet, yep. Yeah, you just have to get number 5 is honor father and mother. Ryan, no pressure. Do you want one or no?
Sure.
The 10 plagues in order? I bet you'll
never
nail
get
it.
this one in order.
So I'd be super impressed.
I can list them all,
He'll
but
get
I
'em.
can't get them in order. I put blood, frogs, gnats, flies, boils, death of livestock, hail, locust, darkness that's palpable, and the death of the firstborn.
Jason,
That's what
you
I
get
got. Except I was questioning whether flies was legit because gnats. Like kind of like I was like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like you get like different. So, but that's exactly what I wrote.
You actually flip 5 and 6 around.
Death of livestock and.
Yeah, I don't know about if I got the same order.
The plague or the death on livestock is number 5. Boils is number 6. Otherwise, you nailed it. You switch. Oh no.
Oh, actually, yeah, I got it.
Oh.
So flies is legit.
Yeah.
It's gnats.
Gnats, flies.
Frogs, gnats, flies.
Yeah, and Jackson and Ryan would know better than I would probably on this, but the Hebrew, we just don't know for sure what the Hebrew words
One of
for
them could
gnats
be
and flies
fleas, it
are.
says in the side, doesn't it? Like
Yeah, I think there's a lot
Bible or
of
something.
gnats and flies are just kind of our best guess. So could be.
Any of it would be bad.
Right.
I just always remember that it was the most inconvenient order. You got the frogs, which would have ate the flies and gnats first.
Wow. I love
We were at the park a couple weeks
getting
ago, man.
insight.
I thought about the flies or whatever, you know, the flies were just like all up on us, and I was like, this is a plague.
It's coming.
Serious. Like, it was
They're terrible.
like hellacious. You know what I mean? Like, I was just like wanted to jump up.
You'd let the Israelites go, wouldn't you? Get out of here. Take yours.
So you're back in air
Like-
conditioning. The game's over.
Right, that's right.
That's right.
All right.
That's all they would have to do to us.
All right, what dates do you guys have? Looks like some of them are sort of blank or all of them. Brian's got a
I
bunch.
guessed one of them.
All right, what do you got, Jason?
I guessed on Exodus 14:30s.
Close.
1447?
What's that, Lyle?
1447?
Boom! Lyle
Damn!
nailed it.
That's the only one.
Yeah, 1447 or
Yeah.
6, either one. That's
Yeah.
cool.
I saw 46 in here too, but.
Yeah, you know, I did that say 46 in there?
Yeah,
somewhere
else I read.
Yeah, see, I usually go with 1446. Other places say 47. It doesn't.
Probably took them a year for all of them to get out of there.
Yeah, whatever works for you is cool. Any other dates you guys had? All right, I can go through these. Well, Ryan, you want to display your knowledge? What do you got?
I put reign of King David circa 1000.
Yeah.
I don't know the Syro-Ephraimite War, 800 something.
Tough.
What is that one?
That one is 732.
Which one?
The Syro-Ephraimite War.
Northern Kingdom is 722, destruction.
Yep.
Don't know the next three.
That's 701, 612, 609. I bet you've got the next. You probably have all the rest of them, don't you, Ryan?
No.
Next three.
605, 597, 586.
Yeah.
Remember the 605 one?
Sometimes the 586, you know, you'll sometimes see a variant like 587.
What was Second Exile?
597? They're all BC, of course. Cyrus's decree, you got that one, Ryan?
Wanted to say 536, but that didn't make any sense. So then I put 516 because that was 70 after 586.
539.
Ah.
And I learned it as 539, and I've since seen some sources that say 538, because they'll say that the Persians defeated the Babylonians in 539, and it was a year later when Cyrus made the decree. So I'm sticking with 539 for now, but if you go with 538, that's cool. Temple completed is 516.
That's it.
Ezra's mission is 458. Nehemiah's mission is 445. I know dates are the worst, but I think this really will bear dividends for the rest of your ministry if you get these dates down. If for no other reason, I mean, it doesn't really change anything to have exact dates, but it just gives your mind clarity to know what happened and to remember even, you know, the Syro-Ephraimite War and the destruction of the Northern Kingdom and, you know, Sennacherib's failed siege. You know, you kind of get the order right of that stuff, and you can kind of, it all, I mean, for me, most of my life has just been awfully muddled, you know, when I read that stuff, but I think it'll help untangle a lot of stuff for you. So, yeah, you guys remember, we won't spend too much time on this, but just to go, since we get so rushed when we're actually talking about it, if we go forward a little bit, it gives you a little bit more time to let things marinate and simmer in your brain. But, the Syro-Ephraimite War, do you guys remember anything about that? So the Syrian king and the king of the northern kingdom, king of the north. Remember, the northern kingdom is a lot of times called Ephraim. So, you know, one of the sons of Joseph, of course, was And so those two kings wanted to form an alliance and to bring the southern king, which was Ahaz, into the alliance. But wait, Ahaz is the northern king. I haven't brushed up on this. So King Ahaz and wait. Ahaz is the southern king, right, Ryan? We'll memorize all the kings eventually. Ahaz is the southern king. I'm trying to remember the kings now. Isaiah 7 or 1 Kings 36, somewhere in there. We'll let Ryan get the names right before I mess it up. But Assyria was the big looming nation, and they're trying to form an anti-Assyrian coalition, and they wanted to get the southern king into the coalition, and the word from Isaiah was stand pat, don't do anything, King Ahaz. King Ahaz is the southern king, and the Lord, will deliver you, and that's we go back to Isaiah 7, and this will be the sign that a virgin shall bear a child. That was the sign for Ahaz. He didn't want to ask for a sign, but the consistent theme through the Old Testament is that it's always bad to enter into alliances. Jehoshaphat entered into alliance with the northern king to build ships, and they were wrecked at Ezion Geber. The alliances always go bad. God's design for his people were always that they would just trust him alone, not form an alliance with Egypt. They're called that a broken reed, that you lean on and you just pierce your hand on, and it doesn't help you at all. Or with Babylon or with Assyria, there's always a train wreck. But Ahaz didn't want to enter into the alliance, but instead of trusting the Lord, he hired the Assyrians and to do battle against the northern kingdom. And so Assyria comes and attacks Israel. So shrunk its territory a ton, stole territory from it, really made it into a vassal state. So they had to serve Assyria from that point on. And then I think there was some rebellion in 722, and the Assyrians came and crushed them. But we'll get all those details ironed out as we enter into 1st and 2nd Kings, and it gets a little bit more concrete in my brain every time through, but it takes a long time. Who are the other two kings? Pekah of the northern kingdom, and Rezin of Damascus, right? And it comes back to me after a while. Damascus being the capital of Syria. Sometimes Syria gets referenced as Damascus. You guys remember Sennacherib's failed siege?
I remember vaguely a lot of things. Vaguely.
Yeah,
He was really bad.
Who was the king of Judah at that time? This is a pretty big story in the Old Testament, so it's a great one to get under your belt.
Ahab. Remember that guy?
Not Ahab.
Like
He's the northern king.
That really crazy cool name.
This is Hezekiah. So whereas Ahaz, is being threatened, he got these two kings ready to make war against him. They do make war against him, and actually they kill a lot of people from the southern kingdom. And then Ahaz calls upon Assyria, and that's going to turn bad. But Hezekiah, in his case, when the Assyrians have really done a lot of damage, and this is prophesied in Isaiah 8 too. They've wiped out all these small towns and villages on their way up to Jerusalem, and they're getting closer to Jerusalem. It talks about it sweeping up over your land and coming up all the way to the neck, and the head is about to be swallowed up. That's the image in Isaiah prophesying it. So they're ready to attack Jerusalem, and Hezekiah prays, and the angel of death comes and kills them through, I don't know, a plague maybe or something. I'm not sure if we're told, but 185,000 Assyrians die. Sennacherib lives. He goes back into the temple of his god Nisroch, and then his two sons, Dramalak and some other guy, they kill him in the temple of his god. And then the Battle of Megiddo, we remember King Josiah. Remember what you remember that King Josiah was a good guy, right? We talked last week about what awesome thing happened during his reign.
He found Deuteronomy and thought it was amazing, so he instituted that law. Yeah, probably the book of Deuteronomy. It's not stated in there, but and just to review a little bit from that, who was the priest of the temple when it was found? They're doing reconstruction.
Joshua.
Not Joshua. Joshua was a high priest. That's later in the return to Israel. It's Hilkiah. And then who is the prophetess that they took counsel with, took this book to her, and what do we do with this now? Her name was Huldah. So we'll keep reviewing those. We'll try and get those names down.
What's the name of Sennacherib's general, man? You know that guy?
The Rob Sheka.
Yes! Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I always thought like it's like that's the coolest story. Right. Like Hezekiah, like that would be seriously scary. You know the friend that remember the Jewish Philistine conversation we had 6 months ago? That same friend had to do a paper on like in his Old Testament class. Did a thing on I don't know ancient warfare or something like that. You know, and he was reading like primary texts about Sennacherib and these other guys, and like they wrote, you know, like poetry and crazy stuff, like pluck out their testicles like the seeds of a melon. Like it was raw, scary. You know what I mean? Like gigantic faith for Hezekiah. Or, you know what I mean? Like just imagine like Daniel's friends are all freaking, you know. I mean, you're really bad.
Yeah, it doesn't go well. We'll talk about that when we get to Judges. The kings, things that happen to kings when they're captured. It's not pretty.
Thumbs get chopped off.
Yeah, remember the dude, the king.
Well,
the king at the beginning of Judges who gets his thumbs chopped off. Remember his name?
Just read it.
Adonai Bezek.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's a bad deal to get your thumbs.
Didn't he have like 70 kings?
You could never like get a really good look.
Yeah, he said 70 kings have eaten scraps under my table. You know, he had done the same thing to all these kings, cutting off their thumbs, and then it came around to him, and he had to do it as well. Yeah, they would they would capture these kings, and they were their trophies, right? Kind of like a pet that you'd keep around. Hey, look at this great king here who now has no thumbs or toes. I defeated him. And, you know,
On a chain in the backyard.
yeah, seriously, it's bad. It's dark. You guys remember, just looking over these dates, remember in 605, who was exiled, significant guys exiled in 605?
Daniel, Shadrach, Abednego.
Yeah, Abednego. Almost my whole life, I've always mispronounced Abednego. It's Abednego. Abednego. We always, so in English, Ryan doesn't have this problem. For me, I want to put the N and say Abednego, but it's Abednego.
Abednego.
Hard to say. And 597, who was exiled in that year? Yeah, nice job. 586 was the bad one. Ryan alluded to, you guys probably remember in Jeremiah, it's prophesied that the Israelites would be exiled for how many years? 70 years. But then it gets a little confusing when you're like, oh, well, if they were exiled in 586, then it should be 516, right? And if it's 70 years, and we, from our vantage point, we're just not quite sure how to count the 70 years. But there's no easy 70 years from this date to that date, unless it's the final exile and the temple completed. Could be, but they were returned to the land long before the temple was completed. But whether it's the first exile where it starts counting, or the second, the final one, that's a little unclear. Which two prophets, kind of going forward a little bit, so it'll be easier when we get there. Read through Ezra, Jackson might know this one. There's lots of opposition to the building of the temple. They built the altar first. Remember which guys led them back from Persia to Israel? Did you know? There was two guys that are mentioned, Sheshbazzar and Zerubbabel. We don't really know anything about Sheshbazzar. Some people think he's the same guy as Zerubbabel, but that doesn't seem to quite account for all the biblical data. Probably two different guys. Zerubbabel became the governor of the land. So they rebuild the altar first so they can make sacrifices. And then there was so much opposition, people that had been living in the land that wanted to frustrate the building of the temple, that they stopped building it. I think for about 10 years they didn't build. And then there were two prophets that really encouraged them to keep building. Remember, Jackson, who those two prophets were?
Haggai and Zechariah.
Yeah, Haggai and Zechariah. And so to me, I mean, learning this stuff just helps to make sense of Haggai and Zechariah. In Zechariah, that's where you get Joshua, the high priest, Jason. Helps make more sense of Joshua, and then Zerubbabel's mentioned in Zechariah too. So, and then Ezra came back 458. Remember what Ezra's job was. Zach, do you know it? Ezra, what did Ezra do?
Didn't that have something to do with the wall?
Yeah.
The rebuilding?
Yeah, they had already rebuilt the temple, but the people had really forgotten the law. They didn't know it. And so Ezra came back and he taught them the law. Then, of course, Nehemiah, Zach built what?
Nehemiah? Don't remember.
Trent?
He built the wall in like 40 days.
Yeah, I think it was 52, isn't it?
52 days.
Anyone remember? I think 52.
Or at least repaired holes. It's not like he built the whole thing.
Yeah, there were breaches in the wall. Yep. You guys have any questions about these dates, any of these events? All right, let's go to, see what I got. I think we'll start in Joshua. Finally, if there's something else I had to do. Let's go to Joshua and then we'll. I think we'll, got a little quiz for you guys, but we can do this one together probably. We'll just make sure we get all of these answered. We can kind of talk through it as you guys can mention your observations, insights, questions first. Did you guys get Joshua read? Did you get the textbook read?
Yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't have time, so I went straight to Judges.
Okay.
I really did.
Yeah. Jackson, did you have time to get it done?
Yeah, I read most of Joshua and all the textbook of it.
Cool. Lyle, did you get some reading done?
Most of it. Most of Joshua.
All right. Well, what kind of things did you draw out of the book of Joshua? Textbook or the book itself?
It's crazy the similarities of Joshua and Moses just throughout the whole book. I never noticed that before. So that was really.
Yeah, I think you drew that out in your paper a little bit. Yeah, you get the covenant renewal ceremonies at the end of their life.
How can you read it and then it still this looks foreign? You go, I've never seen that before.
Well, that's why we do it, so we can get these things nailed and have a little bit better understanding of it, hopefully, than the people we're teaching it to, so that we have something to offer to them. Trent, anything for you that came out of your reading?
Yeah, no, nothing but just kind of, it was interesting reading. I mean, it's easy to read. It's basically, was it right to read it? It felt like, did it say in the book, it was kind of told as almost a story, like people, it was written as if somebody was telling a later generation the story of what happened. So
Yeah.
just reading it in that light is pointing out kind of the main things we ought to know and remember.
Yeah.
But I actually thought it was really interesting. I even like brought it up when I was drawing the map out, how they allotted the different areas to the different tribes of Israel. So it was cool. I didn't really realize how laid out that whole was in kind of the middle section of Joshua.
Oh yeah, and one of the things that has sort of befuddled me for a long time with the tribes that I think is really interesting, but and sorry, my terrible handwriting, but I'm drawing. That if we pretend this is Judah's allotment, Judah had a pretty big allotment, and then what tribe was totally enclosed within Judah? Remember that? Anyone?
The one that was the.
It wasn't. Benjamin was actually like right here.
Wasn't it the Levites?
No,
allotment?
the Levites. Remember, the Levites were spread throughout. I think they had
Oh.
how many cities was it? 52 cities or something like that throughout the whole land. Some of them, 12 of them were cities of refuge. But this was Simeon. Their allotment, according to Joshua, is entirely within, totally within Judah. Then, a lot of times when we talk about the divided kingdom, that later, the 12 tribes divide into two kingdoms, the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom, and we just call the southern kingdom, if we were to draw a line here, we call the southern kingdom just Judah usually. A lot of times we talk about 10 tribes to the north, and we talk about 2 tribes to the south. But then when we talk about the southern kings, we always just mention Benjamin and Judah. So it's kind of like, well, whatever happened to Simeon, and why aren't they included in the southern kingdom? And, it seems like they, for the most part, just got assimilated into Judah. Then now I'm not remembering all the books. But they say that probably some of the Simeonites ended up migrating, because then you're just left. If you just take Simeon out, then you're just left with 9 tribes. We always talk about 10 tribes. I think that's biblical language talking about 10 tribes. But some of them probably migrated into here. Then at one point in Scripture it says, I'm trying to remember where it is, that the Simeonites, some of them came back to Judah. So that's a little bit interesting. The other thing is that, we have, how many tribes of Judah were there? 12, right? But then when you actually add them up, you got Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah,
Israel?
Dan. Yeah, what did I say?
Judah.
Yeah, how many tribes of Israel? So tribes of Israel, we've got Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, which would be 2, right? We've got Ephraim and Manasseh, and then we've got Benjamin. So that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Weird, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of blows your mind. Blows my mind. And then the other weird thing is that when you look at any of the lists of the tribes in the Bible, it's always 12 listed. I mean, 12 is a really important symbolic number, but it'll always leave off one tribe. And so, we might think of, well, there's 12 landed tribes, right? And we could just erase Levi and say, there's 12 tribes that have land. Or in the book of Revelation, they leave out the Danites. When we read about in Judges, right? The Danites gave way to idolatry. And Dan kind of has a bad reputation. Or other lists leave out, we could combine these two and make one for Joseph. I think there's other lists that maybe leave out Reuben or something like that. So there's roughly 12 tribes.
I used to hear that, I remember, I can't think of that. Must be lead in our paint.
We probably have that problem. I like the seriousness of it.
When I was a lot more dispensational, I heard, that the Antichrist is coming from the tribe of Dan. It's possible. I'm not saying it's impossible.
That who? What?
That the Antichrist is coming from Dan. You're saying all these negative things about Dan,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's
Ryan, you got anything to add to that discussion?
to that can of worms.
Yeah. I think we can keep talking about 10 tribes to the north, 2 to the south, and we just know in the back of our minds, a little bit more nuance to it, but sometimes in scripture it's just called one tribe because Benjamin kind of gotten assimilated into Judah and was so small compared to Judah, so the Bible sometimes talks about 2, sometimes 1.
Just remember the 3 tribes to the east. Reuben, half of the that starts with an M.
Mm-hmm. Manasseh.
Okay, half Manasseh, and then the Gadites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll probably, if we can get around to it, we'll try and memorize all the tribes in order. I remember the first time we went through Old Testament survey, we were always struggling to come up with the names. All of us were, and we took it upon ourselves to memorize them all. And I think that gives you confidence too. I memorized them in the order of the sons, their birth. Asher, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin, 12 sons of Jacob. So when you guys have way too much time on your hands, you can take on that project too. Anything else from the book of Joshua that you guys want to talk about? I mean, I can talk about a lot of things, but it's way more interesting if you guys.
I liked the talk of the gifts and whatnot. Are they conditional or unconditional?
Mm-hmm.
Or will the punishment consequent on the nation's failure to keep God's commandments override the promises? There's this tension consistently, really, in the Old Testament between conditional and unconditional promises of God, and God withdrawing himself from the people, but then because it's conditional and they're failing, but then on the other end, unconditionally sticking with them, and it's like this constant tension. So I did think that was a good thing pointed out in the book, because I guess the idea is that Jesus, how we wrestle with that tension in the end, I think, is that, why would this be presented as conditional? Well, in a way it is, because we have to meet the law and we fail. But Jesus meets the law for us, so it's also unconditional, because despite our sin, he met those qualifications. So, but just reading through that wrestling and seeing that and thinking that through, I think, is helpful.
Yeah, I think that's huge, Zach. Took me, I was scratching my head for a long time at those passages, like, well, which way is it? But to see the deliberate tension in Scripture that only gets resolved, at the cross, I think is huge. Plug in. The battery's almost dead. Just have to find my cord. I thought I brought it in here. Anybody see a computer cord? Oh, that's it. Did it? Thanks, Lyle. All right, anything else?
There was a lot of good stuff in the book. I don't know if I'll put anything up,
I
but,
don't think you got it read.
no, I read the intro book.
Oh, okay.
I didn't
got
read Joshua.
Yeah,
I've read it a bunch of times. But,
Sweet.
but I'm sorry, I'm like chewing on a piece of broccoli. Something I always think of in the book of Joshua's Bible. It always strikes me as just like such an illustration of, I don't know, just how it applies to us so much about the Great Commission and everything. And I just think it's amazing, you know. I don't know, there's just so many things to I think the whole conquest just mirrors Matthew 28:18 and going out in the authority of God. And, you know, you got like what is it, Genesis 1:28, taking dominion, then you got this conquest, and then you have the Great Commission, Matthew 28:18. You know what I mean? And I think they all go together, but you just see this conquest, and I think it applies to us. You see all these promises, and you know, no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. You know what I mean? If you're doing this and planting your flag, I will not leave you or forsake you. Be very courageous. You know, do not turn from this law left or right, and just there'll be power and authority. And it's really, I don't know, that's what I think of. Really good stuff.
Yeah, I really liked that part of the end of the chapter where it says approaching the New Testament, and it talked about that, the conquest. That last sentence, Israel enjoyed an earthly inheritance and an earthly kingdom, but the kingdom in which the church is a part of is spiritual and heavenly. Just a couple other really helpful connections, like the promised rest and models of faith, God's warrior, and also how it starts off. The name of Jesus is a Greek writing of the Hebrew name Joshua. So that's kind of a crazy reality that nobody knows.
Yeah. That'll preach. It's a good thing to point out for us to know. Which means, you guys remember what Shah means in Hebrew?
I remember what Jesus means in Matthew. I don't know what that was.
Salvation. Yeah, yes, salvation. Elisha. My God is salvation. Well, let's talk. We can do a deeper dive into Joshua, but maybe we should talk about our papers first, so I don't steal anybody's thunder. I think I got. See, everybody got a paper except Lyle.
Except me. I don't know.
Who wants to share their perspective on, basically the question that people bring up all the time in various forms of just the difficulty of the violence of the Old Testament and God commanding people to be killed. And, definitely had people tell me, they struggle with the Old Testament and all the blood. So how do you guys, who wants to go first? I've read everybody's paper, but I think I'm probably the only one, unless Ryan read them, but you guys can present for. Jason, you want to tackle it first? Okay. Trent, you want to go?
I will if you want.
Sure, you
can
go.
Shoot. You go, Trent, and then I'll
Well, I just
tag it behind you.
I cheated a little bit. I got John Piper's opinion before I gave my total answer. But
that's never cheating.
Okay.
That's going to the authoritative source.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So just pointing out right away the reality of it does seem harsh. God did clearly kill people. I mean, he opened up the earth and swallowed many families, and that was earlier, not in Judges, but so he ordered the killing of all these people, but who also granted them life, who's sovereign over life and death. So every day, when however many people in the world die, I mean, if you really genuinely believe in God's sovereignty, every day God's killing, whatever the number, 50,000 people. So just keeping that reality in perspective, who God is as sovereign Lord. And then just understanding that all these people were receiving judgment from the Lord. So I don't know. I actually, well, I got a couple good comments on my paper. I didn't really answer the question. I just kind of agreed with the question. it's a pretty intense thing. But the Old Testament is really heavy on pointing out God's justice and wrath towards sin, while it seems harsh because we're used to the New Testament where God's mercy and grace and love is just totally showcased in Jesus Christ. So just realizing that you've only been exposed to the one characteristic of the Lord or God. So just knowing that. Then I pointed out how in Revelation you see it again where God's wrath is going to be poured out on the sinners, which maybe wouldn't be helpful to tell the lady who's already a little shook. You ain't seen nothing yet.
Right. Yeah, you had all good answers. It was, Luke's pointing out, you're kind of turning up the heat. You're right, it is harsh and brutal and bad, and it gets worse, kind of thing. But yeah, it's true. Definitely. Finding your pastoral voice to be able to communicate that is.
Okay.
Okay. Wrote a few things. I think to me it seems, I don't know, the biggest thing. There is the things, it's somewhat secondary, but it's not secondary because it's the point of all of history. This is illustrating bigger truths, and God is orchestrating this, and for the final judgment and all this stuff. You know what I mean? I always look at the Old Testament like that. But anyway, I think our perspective of sin is the big thing that I wrote. Our perspective of sin and humanity is just totally skewed. That's why we struggle with it. We imagine people as being judged and not deserving it, and just completely off. We don't see sin like God does. And I think that's the biggest thing. Even with children, we struggle with that. But I mean, what about on Judgment Day? There's going to be a day when every child on earth is going to be judged. And Jesus comes back. And they're either going to go to heaven or hell. And the final day, what's the difference between that and 5,000 people in the Canaanite city dying, 100 million dying on the last day? You know what I mean? It's like what about election? There are way bigger problems in the Bible than this. You know what I mean? Problems, but it all goes back to the perspective of sin and, like I said, because we imagine people saying, oh God, whatever, running to God, and saying, I want you, have mercy, and all this stuff. And really, people don't want anything to do with God or running away from Him.
Yeah, Jackson, what do you add or echo?
Yeah, it was, it's a really difficult question, but just goes back to God showing us, the problems of sin, the effects of it, and consequences of sin, and how there's no hope for any of the people. The Israelites when eventually fall and deserve the wrath of God just as much as the Canaanites, and that obviously points to Jesus. And I thought it was really, the Canaanites, Noah cursing, and it's, you see God working from Noah's time, to, using Ham's sin to give the Israelites an inheritance, hundreds of years later. And that was just really interesting for me, that I saw. But yeah, it's just, I don't know, I just really thought, even children would be suffer because of the sins of their parents, and I don't know, everything else you guys said.
I would tell her though, and you know, my paper was way different than the way I just described it. I wouldn't say it to a woman struggling like I just said it to the class. It would be super grace-filled and gentle.
Yeah.
And I would probably put this caveat in there that God judges according to Revelation. I think Genesis 1 or Romans 1:20 is pretty clear about that. You know what I mean? That's kind of my go-to verse, like with children. It's, you know, our knee-jerk thing with the whole thing. The only reason we struggle with it is because we're image bearers. You know, we struggle with children hurting or going to hell because we're like God. So it's not like he wants to go send all the kids to hell. You know what I mean? Like any compassion in us is because we're like him, you know? So that's from him. You know, he's merciful and he judges according to Revelation. And I don't know what the hell that looks like, but you know, he's merciful. And I can't imagine, you know, yeah.
Yeah, Luke pointed out that verse that says the Lord does not delight in the destruction of the wicked.
Lyle, Ryan, would you guys add anything?
Not really at this point.
Ryan?
Just, you know, I don't know how if you guys follow at all current trends in the church and theology, but you know, there is you know, I think of a lot of so-called progressive Christianity, you know, that is sort of a major competitor for evangelical Christianity in North America, at least. And I think of how a lot of people from that perspective try to see things. And there's a group of pastors, theologians that want to kind of still hold some sort of authoritative stance of the Bible for the life of the church and the life of people, but also kind of want to have also seem to be more of a you know, a progressive tone in their politics and their religion. But and so some of those guys would, Greg Boyd has a massive book that just came out called The Crucifixion of the Warrior God, where he says that he tries to argue that everything in the Old Testament about God killing, God allowing killing, God, any kind of violence of any kind is some sort of shadowy like foil that God is using to help his people see that all violence is utterly abhorrent to God. Because, and the kind of the theme that these guys in that ilk sort of pound on all the time is Jesus is the picture of God completely and absolutely. And Jesus doesn't kill his enemies; he dies for his enemies. You know, and so they kind of take that as an absolute like an absolute dictum. And would say, so everything that we see in the scriptures that seems like God kills his enemies or God, you know, punishes his enemies in a violent way or whatever, that's I don't know how he tries to maintain, you know, some sort of inspiration of scripture while maintaining this position, but that's either a human perspective on God, like a human, like the human authors projecting a man-centered violence onto God that is really actually alien to his character, or it's, you know, it's a load of baloney, you know. And so, but there are a lot of people for whom that's really persuasive, you know, that that since Jesus is, Jesus is the clearest picture of what God is like, and there's no violence in Jesus ever. That can't be what God is like in any way. And so, genocide, so to speak, of the Old Testament and even Revelations, warnings of divine violence are picturesque or symbolic or a human perspective, but not really what's going on. So just so you're aware, again, I don't know how much you guys read this sort of stuff or encounter this sort of stuff, but there are a lot of folks who would maintain Christianity or claim to be a follower of Jesus that would try to argue that way. And it's up to you to decide how persuasive you find it, but I personally think it's a really difficult reading of Scripture, and I don't find any real merit in it. So I think we have to default to that God is both. We have to believe what the Bible says about God, that He's simultaneously all holy and all loving, and He's simultaneously all just and all good and all merciful, and so we have to believe what He says about those things, and that everything God does is right, because it flows from His character of absolute righteousness. If we forfeit that because it's a little sticky or it's a little awkward, or not a little awkward, or it puts us in some seemingly uncomfortable places, then where else are we going to go? What if you eliminate that sovereign, all righteous God? Then what standard do you even have to say that the genocide of a people is wrong? Like if you give up, if you say there can't be a God like that, then what grounds does anybody have to say that what Hitler or Stalin did was wrong? You say that because we believe, everyone believes instinctively, I think, because of natural revelation, that there is an absolute accounting, that there's one from whom law comes, and one from whom righteousness flows, and everybody has a base instinct of that. And if you deny the God of the Scriptures, that He's not like that He's not all just and all righteous, then you kind of cut the feet out from being able to make any kind of moral judgment at all. And so, wow, I'm really babbling now, so I'm going to stop. But
I thought you were preaching.
Those are just sort of my loosely amalgamated thoughts about the whole thing. How you communicate that in a pastoral way at the moment. But you got to call people back, I think, to just, what does the Bible say about the Lord? Man, He is really, really, really serious about sin. Like, way more serious than any of us even could dream that we are. We think sin's a big deal. Oh, we don't even know half of it, or whatever, a fraction of it. If there's a hell, if there's a lake of fire that burns forever and ever, God cares an awful lot more about sin than any human being does. And if we could, and so the more we fear the Lord, the more we reverence His name, the more we understand His character, I think it helps us process this stuff.
Would like the story of Ananias and Sapphira, would that be a good argument against them? I mean, because they were just killed on the spot for lying. It wasn't in the Old Testament; it's in the New Testament. So.
Yeah, you don't really avoid the problem. Like, there was a movement in church history called the Gnostics, who you maybe read about them or more than I do about them, but basically it said that the God of the Old Testament, Marcion is kind of one of the early leaders, said that the God of the Old Testament was a demiurge. He was a secondary or lesser vindictive, angry, hateful, judgmental God. and the God of the New Testament is the true God, and like so he kind of pitted old versus new, and that's such a deadly mistake, And I think a lot of Christians are kind of border on that in their view of the Old Testament and the New Testament because they don't have a very full reading really of the New Testament.
Yeah, I've heard that preached before, that, the Old Testament God was different than the New Testament.
That's when you leave that church.
Yeah.
I'd be like, heretic, peace out.
Yeah, Ananias and Sapphira, and Jesus overturning the tables in the temple, and you see flashes of God's justice maker in the New Testament. Revelation,
Two, if you get rid of judgment, you don't really have grace. You have maybe some glimpse of grace, but you don't really have grace. Just like I was just thinking of like Romans 9 when Paul's talking about election. When he says, "What if God, desiring to show His wrath and to make known His power, has endured with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction? Now, in order to," is debated by some people, but the truth is still there, whether it's in this verse or not. Vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, in order to make known the riches of His glory for vessels of mercy. So, like, the contrast is on purpose. You know what I mean? Like, whether it's here or not, I mean, it's biblical. Like Judgment Day is going to be really, really, really awesome for those under grace because we're going to see how extreme judgment really is for the rest of the world as they're cast into the lake of fire. And we're like, whoa, I should totally be on that side, but I'm not. Because then we really are going to see everything that God does.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I think you guys have a good base by which to respond to those questions and to think through it. So,
Andy, did you get my paper?
yeah, sorry. Every once in a while, you've got to say something a little more often so I don't forget about you on the screen. Sorry, there's that.
Okay.
What do you want to add to the discussion?
Well, I want to make sure you got it because I uploaded a little earlier last week. So, I mean, I was pretty much on the same page. I think the people who sort of separate the Old and New Testament God, I don't think they fully think through, even if you separate, the New Testament God, still, people are going to hell, so even if it's not a physical death that you're having Israel just take out a people, or you're not swallowing them up in the earth or something, we know there's judgment for people who don't believe in Christ. There's still that judgment aspect. So whether you believe God's killing people physically then, or allowing people to die now, allowing people to die of cancer. And I know a lot of people just don't grasp like God's sovereignty, but just the idea that God can do something and doesn't, and bringing up like, look, there's still this issue. And I think bringing it back to the fact of, look, like Jason was saying, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and the wages of sin is death, Romans 3 and 6:23. So I think when you go to that and realize that, I think just there's this love for God's, really a love for His mercy and a love for His, graciousness and His attributes. But I don't think people love His justice like they should. People just focus so much on individual attributes of God, and they just miss who God is. And without the judgment of God, and without the wrath of God, we wouldn't even understand His grace and wouldn't understand His love and mercy in such a deep way. And that's why, like you said, Jason, that's why when we have those vessels of wrath, it makes it even more so amazing when you're a vessel of mercy to see the destruction that God brought you out of, So I think for myself, when I was writing this, it's just to bring up that there are these issues of judgment, and it's not just a Old Testament thing, it's a New Testament thing too, whether they see it or not. There's a lot of issues with judgment. So then at that point, you just have to sort of ask yourself, I guess you're really going back to God's attributes. He loves us, and his love is very important, but at the same time, I think we should also desire his grace and or to see his justice. Sorry, because the idea that God would let people into heaven who are full of sin, obviously, like, that's wrong, right? And we should desire justice. Without perfection or without holiness, no one will see the Lord. And thinking of Moses in the Old Testament too, he couldn't even look at God in the face in his sin. He could barely see the backside of God. So when you think of that and think that God has to punish sin, he can't let you in dirty and clean. I think it's just like, look, he is just. He will take people out. He will take people out even in the Old Testament. But he gave them some time, for one, even though he wasn't obligated to. And two, he sent Jesus Christ to earth in a great act of love to save anyone who would believe. So I think it really comes back to the gospel too. So there is this tension between justice and mercy, and I think we should sort of love them both. So that's sort of where I would land, is arguing that way, I guess. But not really arguing, obviously, but gracious with the old ladies.
So much comes to your mind, man. What about, there's so many problems with error like that. You just think, so what about God crucifying his son or orchestrating it and pouring out judgment on his son? Isn't that wrong? You know what I mean? It's like that would be the most crazy act ever. So many things. What do you do? What about vengeance? What are you going to do about all the people who wronged you? You know what I mean? Like, that's the hope of the Christian, Romans 12. I don't have to deal with this. They're either going to get saved and Jesus paid for their sin, or God's going to deal with it. Like, that's a prayer in Revelation. How long?
Yeah, and you have in Exodus too. You think of like the plagues. Like, God could have just struck them all down right then and there. And Scripture is clear. Like, he hardened, Pharaoh's heart at that time, really to force the whole scenario to happen. Like, it's dead obvious in Scripture in several places. So God hardens the heart of Pharaoh to do that, allows all these plagues to happen, allows all these people to get hurt and killed that are, granted, he's using their own sin. It's not like he's creating a sin in them. But you'd be like, why would God do that? Why would God allow that scenario to happen and then kill firstborns? Why would he do that? But in the end, we see an amazing picture of love and redemption that we never would have seen otherwise. If God just would have let them all go and just softened everyone's heart like cherries, and I don't know, it's all happy-go-lucky. We wouldn't have seen the beauty of his love. We wouldn't have seen the redemption of God. We just would have seen, I guess, God's people have it easy all the time, and we don't have to worry. And then all of us would forget about God, because we wouldn't even need him in the first place. We would take him for granted. So I think we can look back at those stories and see his character and see both aspects and how they work together.
That's good. Yeah. Let's go to our Joshua handout, and we'll make sure we're getting the big things in Joshua under our belts. So you guys, the first one's kind of a gimme, maybe not a gimme, maybe a gimme. What Canaanite woman hid 2 Israelite spies? Rahab, yeah.
My question, reading that, I go, what were the Israelites doing in the prostitute's house anyway? I just go,
Yeah.
Why that was the lady they went up to and asked if they could stay at their house. Maybe they were running away from somebody and they just dove into her house.
Yeah, or maybe that's the least suspicious. Oh, we're used to guys going into that house.
Somebody knew they were there.
Yeah.
That's true.
The other, whoever it was from the city, said, yeah, where are they?
Yeah, it's a place that it wouldn't matter that, like, newcomers People be like, oh, they're going up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Oh, that's true.
You couldn't just go to someone who was known's house. Then that would be really weird.
Like the mayor of the city or something.
Yeah. Hey, we're about to
Obvious.
sue you guys.
It's a good, I've never really thought about that, Lyle. I mean, it's good to think through. Yeah. Why the prostitute's house? Yeah. Hiding under flax, I think it was, stalks of flax. Walton says they would have been really stinky. Like it would have been a bad proposition. They would have been wet and smelly. And guess who knows how dry they would have been. Rahab hides them. The whole thing gets saved. You guys, any insight or questions you have as we make our way through, feel free to say. So after crossing the Jordan River, the Israelites memorialized the crossing by stacking up 12 stones at what place?
One thing I saw was the feet of the priests, but I don't know the location.
Yeah.
So it's usually the feet of the priests, but
Yeah, what about that, Lyle? The feet of the priests is kind of an interesting.
I don't know.
They had to, the priests had to go in first, right, with the ark
Okay.
before the river split.
Mm.
So they had to. God was requiring some faith from them. They had to enter. That's kind of weird if you enter and I guess it's not going to split. Everyone back up. But they're trusting the Lord for the river to split.
And stacked them at Gilgal.
Yeah, nicely done.
All right.
Did you remember that, or did you have to look
I
it up?
remembered it right after I read it, and you sent the email out, and I answered them.
Oh, sure. Yeah, Gilgal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't requiring you to do the work ahead of time, but.
Well, you know me.
I like it. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, some people say I've never really enjoyed this line of argument personally, but some people point out that the Jordan, along the Jordan, it was known during springtime flood seasons that there were sometimes mudslides that would jam up the river and would actually stop the flow of the Jordan. And so, they suggest that may have been what God used to divide the Jordan River, split it in two.
Seems to take away the Red Sea.
Yeah, and people make claims, try to come up with natural claims for that too, like a wind that blew for a long time and drove the sea away. And some people say it's not the Red Sea, but it's actually the Reed Sea. There's a different sea. But
I looked up not real long ago. I don't know how legitimate this is, but I was wondering how deep the Red Sea was. Like I said, you might know, but
I don't.
The source I found said, like at this point or something, it was like 1,200. It was crazy deep.
Yeah.
Like it's not some wind. It would be like,
Yeah.
that's why it says a wall of water.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It'd be like really crazy.
Yeah, I've never really enjoyed those interpretations or
Yeah.
found them persuasive. But, Gibeath Ha'araloth. Anybody know what that means? Jackson, you might get it from your knowledge of Hebrew. Har is mountain.
Okay, I was thinking that, but I didn't want to.
Yeah. Oh, Trent, you got it because you looked it up. This is a fun one.
Yeah, no, I actually looked it up, and I
You didn't
still
find
could. It says,
I think you
today I
got
have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you, and so the name of that place, and they kept calling it Gilgal. They didn't really say anything about.
it. Oh. Did you have in your
I read
footnote?
in 5:2.
It's in your footnote right there.
Oh.
I guess you would have had to have read the footnote for that one. The Hill of Foreskins.
Gross.
Yeah, it's pretty gross. So interesting and
Really?
yeah.
Okay.
Hill of Foreskins.
Hill of Foreskins. Yeah.
Tempted to say some.
I remember Zach Summerlot. He was on the screen. He always joked around about that. Starting a band with that name.
Oh my word.
So, but on a more serious note, this is the second generation of people going into the promised land. And apparently they hadn't been keeping up with circumcisions. And so before they go into God's promised land, they have to take the mark of, God's covenant. And so they perform a mass circumcision ceremony or something or other and piled up the skins, apparently.
That would really make you think too. You'd be so mad. You'd be like, Mom and Dad, why didn't you do this?
Yeah, when I was little, yeah.
Like everyone would really regret it.
Yeah. They say, Walton says a lot of times when men would be like a non-Jew would marry into Israel, that it would be the male in-laws that would perform the ceremony. You think about your father-in-law or your brother-in-law, like.
Better hope they like you.
Yeah, seriously, you gotta really trust them.
Good vision and a steady hand.
Right. Oh man, yeah.
They didn't have any real sharp knives back then.
I always wonder about that. I don't know the procedure, how it flintstone.
Flintstone is about really what they would have.
They had steel by the time of the Philistines and Saul and David. They had swords and.
True.
So they had some steel, but it wasn't. I don't think it was real common, and I don't know. I wonder about that too. Didn't I think Moses' wife grabbed a flintstone?
Yeah, I heard
to
something about
circumcise.
Flintstone.
Yeah.
Yeah, to do. Yeah, read about that.
Be unpleasant.
That works. Flint just gets sharp as.
We know it lays you up because of that story in Genesis with Deborah and all that stuff. Or Dinah, yeah.
Yeah. Levi and.
Because those dudes are all laid up for a couple days, and the brothers come in and take them out.
Yeah, Levi and Simeon took out the Shechemites. And, Jacob, they were, when Jacob pronounced his blessing on the sons, they're called men of violence, and they get a bad word spoken about them. So they paid the price. It wasn't the godly thing to do. But
Which ones are those again?
Levi and Simeon. Yeah, Shechemite. One of the Shechemite men stole Dinah and raped her, and then turned around and requested her as his wife. So Simeon and Levi said, "Oh, sure, yeah, take her. You just have to all be circumcised first. Your whole clan." And that was, sometimes groups of people would intermarry and give their wives to each other. So that was all common stuff. But
pretty cunning. They had to have kept a straight face. They got them all to do it. Yeah, everybody was in on it. Yeah,
And then who went in and killed them all?
Levi and Simeon.
They both did that together.
Yep. Yeah, and you wonder.
All the guys.
I don't know if they had some servants that did it with them. It's kind of hard to imagine two guys wiping out a whole village, but I guess
They did it at night, didn't they?
Yeah, maybe,
said they did it
maybe
at
if you
night.
go at night and I don't know. How about the ram's horn? You know what that's called?
I looked everywhere. Couldn't find it. Must be in the.
Jason's got it.
What'd you say?
So far?
Shofar. King Joshua blows the shofar.
Spell S-H.
I guess that's right. I don't know.
Ofar, yeah.
Oh, I
Shofar.
took the edge. Probably because my last name.
Shows up at times in scripture and
Extremely difficult to blow through and make noise.
yeah, they are tough. I've tried it a few times. And it'd be cool if I had them here, but I'll just put out there that anyone who makes it to the very end of Old Testament survey will get a shofar at the end. So a little incentive to keep coming to class, take the test at the end, don't give up. There's a shofar in it for you.
Yeah, how good do we have to do on a test?
Better than 40%.
Let's see.
There's our stand.
Right. Where did the stoning of Achan take place? And what did it mean?
Bacon.
Wasn't that like
What's that?
Jericho.
Not Jericho. That he did. Yeah, that's where he took the plunder from, was Jericho.
Okay.
But that's not where he was stoned.
HN, like ACHON.
O-R.
O-R.
Acor, yeah. Yep. Acor means I think Valley of Trouble. Speaking about trouble, is it Valley of Trouble, Trent? Did you find that? Better make sure again before I get it wrong.
Chapter 7.
Oh yeah, we didn't even take a break. You guys need a break quick?
Yes.
Let's take a quick break, Zach. 5 minutes. Sorry, I got kind of carried away. I think it's Valley of Trouble. The Valley of
Acor
Trouble
means trouble.
or just trouble, yeah. And when pronouncing Hebrew words, it took me a long time to figure this out. The CHs are never.
Is it kind of
Yeah, which you don't have to do the Hebrew.
that's a weird.
But it's always going to be a K sound, you know. So you never have to wonder. It took me quite a while to figure that out. There's a lot of CHs.
So you said I find the syllabus online under TBA?
Yeah, and the TPA, it's in the Google Drive.
Okay.
I'll send you a link to it.
Do you have a Gmail account? I suppose
Yeah.
You maybe,
I do.
you do.
yeah. I don't think we have a student file for you,
No,
but
I'm just hanging out.
If you go to your Gmail account, up in the top left corner, you can usually click on some icon and it'll give you all your different Gmail options. You can go to Google Docs and
Yeah,
I could just give you
Google
my
Docs. There's a
syllabus,
Google
too.
Docs, Google Slides, Google
yeah.
there's all sorts of things.
It'll be under there?
And then there'll be a Google Drive thing. And you click on that and there'll just be a whole bunch of folders.
And I don't know, we may have to, I don't know if you have, I'll talk to Ryan and get you. And then, yeah, if you want to put papers up there too, you can.
Oh, well, I just gotta get up to speed here.
Yeah.
What, now your papers are how long?
Here's the syllabus. I'll just give you mine. Print a new one off. 1 to 3 paragraphs. So we really, I don't want it to be a burden for anyone. I mean, it's just, you know, Jason writes longer ones than some. I mean, you can write a page and a half if you want, but 1 to 3 paragraphs is fine. And it's really just a chance for you before class to think through maybe a thorny theological or pastoral issue and just to, you know, the questions that come up in pastoral ministry related to Old Testament survey. It gives you a chance to think through that before it comes up.
So specific questions, are we?
Yeah, so each week
Each week is good.
there's a different one, yeah. So next week,
Sort of sounded like.
yeah, so kind of have a pastoral situation there.
Okay.
All right, I'll use the restroom.
Makes sense. Wow. Wow.
Then we make fun of ourselves.
That is funny, man. I probably would have enjoyed going to church here with all the homeschoolers. Would have been a haven for jokes.
So where do you live?
Out by Huron. is where I'm from.
Okay. So you come down every week?
Well, I live in Brookings right now,
Okay.
doing the TPA.
Okay.
And TPA Church First Baptist in Brookings. I just graduated from SDSU. So I'm living there, working at Millborn Seeds. From here on, goal is to get back to Huron. In a few years.
Terrific.
And the pastor in Brookings is, what's his name?
Gavin Renser.
I private messaged him. I think he'll sell for that. But I know someone was in. I private messaged here for you're probably getting sold. You know.
Are you allergic to some of these?
Probably.
Hey, you know what? $100. For $100, like a $700 one.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you allergic to
Used
bread?
and stuff.
Yeah.
I already had
What
weights.
bread?
No, I've already got
Really
like,
part of
actually had
the
Toby's old bench.
Oh,
It's the
really?
cheap one, and then I've got like little like, it's in the front of our garage.
It's in our living room.
I'm gonna have to walk away sometime, boys, I'm done. And
That's
Walk
pretty
away?
sweet.
Oh, like,
then come back.
I see.
Why don't you tell the camera all about it?
I told Jackson.
All right, so ACOR, yeah, it means trouble, stoning of Achan. One thing that I think it's Walton that points this out, he's been kind of my primary check-in on things. He points out that, when a whole family gets killed like that, like in the law, the Mosaic law, the law is always that the person that did the crime is the one that gets punished. In other ancient Near Eastern societies, if a young man committed murder, his dad might get killed, as a punishment, or vice versa. You might kill if I kill your son, then you might kill my son. And God's law doesn't permit that. It's the person that does the crime that gets punished. Children don't get punished for their parents' sins. Parents don't get punished for their children's sins. The one that sins is the one that gets punished. That's in the law. But then we see in the story of Achan, it's a whole family getting wiped out. Nathan and Abiram, the children being wiped out. And, Walton points out that when that happens, that's a divine punishment. God's the one, they inquire, and God's the one that, prescribed this punishment. And, that's always God's prerogative. That's not a human prerogative to take out a whole family or take out children. They would just point out, Walt, I mentioned this before, that, Scripture sometimes talks about punishment to 3 or 4 generations, and it's like, well, is it 3 or is it 4? And then that's a stock phrase for an entire family line, and so, there's times where the sin is so pervasive and so serious that an entire family line is taken out by God to, to cleanse the Israelites and to exact punishment. But,
So do you think that's all at one time, pretty much, or is it maybe over a series of time? They just don't reproduce or.
Yeah, in the case of Achan, of course, the whole family was killed.
Yeah.
So I guess there's, you think about something like generational sins or something like curses on a family, and it's never really struck me, when people talk about that now. Like, I don't think the New Testament or the Bible would invite us to think about an entire family being cursed or generations being cursed. I mean, we definitely see that, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and our sins, oftentimes become our kids' sins, and, make us really weary.
Doesn't seem like it.
Leery of our sin, but I don't know if that's like God doing it as much as, it's, we learn behaviors from
Or just learn. That's what I'm wondering, is learn behaviors, and it is going to become, generational sin. Unless somebody breaks that. Breaks it.
Confesses it and fights against it, and
we see that with abuse and alcoholism and anything else. Until somebody draws a line and says, "I'm going to change it."
Yeah.
So it does become generational, but not necessarily, what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I was thinking too, like when you see the families get destroyed like that, and there was other instances, I think, in Daniel or something. Anyway, there's other places where whole families are thrown to the lions.
Dathan and Abiram,
I don't remember.
Yeah, in that case, that's Daniel's persecutors.
Exactly, their whole families are thrown. But anyway,
it wasn't God's thing necessarily, but the.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's a whole nother thing. But anyway,
King Darius, they did the.
Yeah, but anyway, I always think of like in the New Testament, there's, which one of the arguments for like pedobaptism and Presbyterians and stuff. You see salvations of whole families, and whole families getting baptized. A lot of times because you do see that sense of the gospel has come to the family, just like Zacchaeus, and see it in Acts and all over the place. And see kind of the reverse of that. Here it seems, like the judgment of the whole family.
We're so individualized in the Western countries. I don't often think in those terms, but
we are.
Well, did you guys catch Trent? I know you did. What 2 mounts? This was actually in obedience to Deuteronomy 11:29. Moses told the Israelites to do this. In front of what 2 mounts did Joshua and the people of Israel renew their covenant with God with a declaration of blessings and curses? This was Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. And the way it would have worked is that people were on one mountain and other people were on the other mountain, and one group was designated to state the blessings that would come for obedience, and the other group was designated to state the curses that would come on them, and they were renewing the covenant that God had made. The next one, these 2 mounts were near Shechem, and you see Joshua renewing the covenant again at the end of his life at Shechem.
How do you spell that? SH?
Echem, yeah. So lots of covenant renewal ceremonies with Moses and now with Joshua, and just times to remind new babies and people growing up, and the nation had to renew themselves again and remind people of God's promises and warnings.
I was just thinking that would be like practical application. We should do that. I'm not saying like pressure, RCC. I'm just saying, and that would be cool in a church. And I know, in a sense, that's one of the purposes, kind of the Lord's Supper, and every Sunday. Yeah. That's one of the purposes, like every Sunday. But you know what I mean? If like we like pointed that out, like this is what we're doing. You know what I mean? We're renewing.
Yeah.
It's like we're here to renew this thing.
Yeah, it seems like there's some appropriateness to think about rededications at camp. Sometimes that, some of that stuff, there can be bad methodology with all of that. But, there's maybe a place for saying, I am already a believer, but I have been living more for myself than God. And I do want to recommit myself in this moment to follow God wholeheartedly.
Something I had to do.
Yeah.
Several times.
Yeah. We all come to those points.
Come back and a little better focus here.
Yeah. All right, what people deceived the Israelites in order to keep the Israelites from killing them? You guys catch that story?
Yeah.
Yeah, Gibeonites.
Gibeonites?
Gibeonites.
Gibeon.
Yeah. So they were from the land, and they were, God's command was for everyone in the land to be killed, but the Gibeonites pretended to be from another land. They wore worn out clothes and empty canteens, and told Joshua, "Oh, we're not from here. Go ahead and make a promise that you won't kill us." So Joshua, kind of on the fly, thought that sounded good, and of course, it was his error. I mean, they should have killed them by God's command, and Joshua didn't consult with the Lord, and had he consulted with the Lord would have given him direction. And so this is a mistake on Joshua's part. But
like when they found out about it, would it have been? Should they have killed them?
I don't think so, because they had made a vow not to, and at that point, I think their vow was what the higher value was keeping that vow than killing them.
Yeah, it says in 19 there, we have sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel, and now we may not touch them. This we will do to them. Let them live, lest the wrath be upon us because of the oath that we swore to them.
Yeah, oath keeping was a really, really big deal. We get to Jephthah and Judges, and he makes that oath to sacrifice whatever greets him at the door. If the Lord gives him the military, it's his own daughter, and he keeps the oath. Oath keeping's a big deal. In that case, he shouldn't have kept it. And even in Leviticus, there's kind of an escape clause. If you make a dumb vow, you can make a sacrifice and kind of make right with the Lord again. But yeah, keeping your word was significant, as it should be for us now. And one of the interesting things is, the next question: when the Amorites attacked this people, what supernatural things happened that enabled Israel to defend them? I don't know if you guys caught that.
Sun standings still? Was that?
Yeah.
Or was that
Yeah, the sun stands still. There were hailstones. It says the hail killed more people than the sword did.
Yeah.
The sun stood still, and then people, the Amorites started attacking each other. The confusion, everything going on. They're killing each other, which happens a few times in the Old Testament. So, but one of the significant things to see there is that the Amorites are upset at the Gibeonites because they wanted to have a unified Canaanite force against the Israelites. They were recognizing that I mean, the Gibeonites could see it, and these Amorite kings could see it too, that everybody is falling to the Israelites. And so the Amorite kings think, well, we're going to have to band together to try and defeat them. And the Gibeonites, they wanted them to be a part of it too. And so the Amorites attack the Gibeonites, because they're not in this alliance, or to get them into the alliance or whatever. But the Gibeonites appeal to the Israelites, and the Israelites could have been like, oh, man, you're on your own. But when they made this agreement with the Gibeonites, we call it a suzerainty vassal covenant, which is what nations did back then. Is that and what God does with people like Abraham, makes these covenants where the suzerainty is the greater nation, and the vassal state pays tribute to the suzerainty state and submits to it in lots of ways. But there's obligations on the suzerainty state too, and chiefly they're obligated to defend the vassal state. And so this is that sort of an agreement here. So the Israelites feel obligated to come to the defense of the Gibeonites and to defeat the Amorites. Next question: in what cave were the 5 Amorite kings discovered in hiding? It's not coming to me now. I don't have this one mastered, so I've got it. Remember, oh yeah, it's Makkedah. And again, I think just by remembering some of these names, it helps us to remember the story. It becomes a key to remember the whole thing. So the 5 Amorite kings hid in the cave. They get discovered. They block the cave so they can't get out until they're done with the battle, and then they open it up again. This is the cave of Makkedah. And then Joshua puts his foot on them, on their necks. Then they hung them from trees, and that was a way of desecrating their bodies, being an example to other people. Exposing bodies was, in the belief, ancient Near Eastern thought, it had an impact on your afterlife if your body didn't get a proper burial. And of course, this image of Joshua with his foot on their necks becomes the image for, the Lord making a footstool of his enemies, or all things being put underneath Jesus' feet. It's a picture of dominion and authority and defeat of enemies. So there's echoes in the Psalms and the New Testament.
Think of that, cursed is everyone who's saying true.
Yeah.
How did you spell that? I think I spelled it that way.
Makkedah. See if there's anything else I was dying to see about Joshua. Of course, these cities are devoted to the Lord. Harem is the word that gets used. Everything's burned. Precious metals that survived the fire went into the Lord's treasury. It's like the burnt offering where everything belongs to God. In some cases, God gave permission for his people to take plunder, whether it's animals or people, but some of these cities, Jericho, Ai, and Hazar are the ones that are mentioned under this ban, but some of them are completely belonging to the Lord.
Does it say why, or is there any?
I don't know. I don't think there's any explanation. It's Walton compares it to a burnt offering. That some of them, God's people, or God's, some of them are shared with other people, some of them are shared with the priests, and some of them it's just the Lord's.
I wonder if some of those cities like Jericho, like it's really obvious that God won, or something.
That God what?
Won, like it was really, really obvious that it couldn't have been them that did it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And we know that the land was relatively defeated, but there were lots of people that weren't defeated, lots of enemies that still remained. At one point, Scripture says that God left them there to teach another generation how to fight. And we know a lot of it's just disobedience on the part of God's people, that they didn't defeat them all. Jerusalem, you guys remember what Jerusalem was called before it was Jerusalem and the people that lived there? It's mentioned a number of times in Scripture. Jebus, the Jebusites. It took them a long time, the Israelites, a long time to overtake Jerusalem. Of course, it was Joab under David's reign that was the first to attack Jerusalem, and even in David's day,
Didn't he say whoever gets Jerusalem I'm gonna make him the commander?
Yeah,
That's what
Joab went for it. I mean,
That's
it must
awesome story.
must have been a pretty scary thing to be the first to tear into Jerusalem.
That's just such a cool story.
Yeah.
Joab's like, I'm taking this.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
right.
I'm commanding this.
You're right. Yeah.
Everyone had to have been afraid of him after that. You know what I mean? Like,
Bad dude. He's willing to scale a wall or whatever they had to do to get into there.
They knew exactly who were the bad to the bone dudes in the army. They knew, man, the mighty men. Yeah. That stuff's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. About all I've got, other than just a reminder of false gods. You guys remember who the Moabite god was?
Names, Ishtar or Moloch.
It doesn't start with an M. The one from Moabites is not doesn't start with M's don't match up with that. It's Chemosh. The Moabites is Chemosh. The Ammonites, that's Molech or Milcom, alternate names. And then Baal, of course, you're familiar with, but it's kind of confusing to nail down Baal sometimes because we know Baal was a storm god and had to do with agriculture, and but sometimes they talk about the Baals. So sometimes the term's used as a generic term for gods, and sometimes it's a specific term for the chief of the Canaanite pantheon. And there are all kinds of different variants. I mean, obviously these people aren't connected by the internet or by shared books. They've got different languages, all these residents of Canaan. And so, their worship of the gods would take slightly different flavors. And so, I think it's sometimes called the Baals because there's not uniform worship of them. And then Asherah is a consort of Baal associated with rain and crops. And you hear a lot about Asherah poles, Gideon cutting down the Asherah poles, and we get into Judges, and that's just a cultic symbol, these trees that symbolized with Asherah. So Baal, Asherah goes with him. And then there's Ashtaroth, which is different than Asherah. It's Ashtaroth or Ashtaroths. The role of Astars, you won't remember all of that probably, but it's a fertility and war goddess, and oftentimes goes with Baal too. There are a couple. Sometimes it's Asherah, sometimes it's Ashtaroth. Again, it's sort of just hard to nail down, everything with all these false gods, just because I think they were worshipped in different ways and different times and slightly different places. But it's helpful to have some familiarity with them. Make your way through the Old Testament. All right, let's go to Judges, and I've got a handout for that too.
Love me some handouts.
Yeah, Zach, I think you've got these, don't you? Did you find your attachments in your email from?
I did. I found them.
All right, we can work through this together too, but you've got to do the 8 major judges in order on your own. And in your syllabus, there's just 7, so if you miss the 8th one that I added.
I was about to say, I don't remember being.
I threw Eli in on you guys last week. I mentioned that. So Eli, he's a freebie now. He's number 7. And of course, Eli and Samuel aren't in the book of Judges, so we're kind of adding them because they're in 1 Samuel. Again, the major judges, just so called because we know a lot about these guys. The minor judges just aren't told much about. Kind of like the major prophets, they're called major just because they're longer books, and the minor ones are smaller books.
They're supposed to be in order.
Yeah.
Oh, man. You wouldn't be in order. Now I gotta move some stuff.
I need to get the judges.
You're going to have, if they're in order, then you can just rattle them off, and it's going to give you so much more confidence teaching the Bible, thinking through the Bible. All right, you guys got it?
Just the judges or the whole paper?
The judges.
Okay.
We'll work through the other ones together. Zach, let's hear it from you. You got them in order?
I don't have the order. I'm so terrible with putting things in order.
Tell us which ones you have.
All right, I got Othniel, Deborah, Jephthah. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Gideon. I believe it's Samuel, then Samson, and Eli.
Yeah, nice job. Did he miss any? Did he miss one, or did he get them all? Ehud.
Yes, that's what I missed one. Yeah, and I looked it up after, and it was Ehud.
Sure. Now, personally, I found I'm terrible at memorizing things, but I find when I do it in order, then I'm like, if I'm working on them, I'm doing it the same way every time, and in my mind, I'll begin to form a rhythm to it. Othniel, Ehud, Deborah, Gideon, Jephthah, Samson, Samuel, and maybe the rhythm's going to be different in your head, but I think it's easier to memorize if you do it in order. Otherwise, you're like, oh, now what's that other one? I think I might have missed one, or it's just.
It goes Jephthah, then Samson.
Yeah, yep. Othniel, Ehud, Deborah, Gideon, Jephthah, Samson, Eli, Samuel. Samuel's the last great judge. Of course, he's a transitional character, really important because he's the one that ushers in the monarchy into Israel, and so Samuel's super important. Yeah, Othniel, remember he's the cousin. Remember who his cousin is? Caleb. Yeah, nice job, Jackson. And everybody remembers the story of Ehud, right?
I just read it, so I
It's
don't remember.
all right. Let's see. Who did Ehud kill? You guys remember?
Fat King.
Oh,
Fat
that's
King.
right. My favorite story.
Oh, you
we were
forgot.
just
You
talking
did,
about it
yeah.
the other day.
Oh, man.
Where the poop comes out.
Yeah. So he kills Eglon is his name. He's the king of Moab. That's where getting down some of these foreign nations. Kind of
way to the hills.
Illuminate some of the text. Yeah, it's a grisly affair. So he goes in, right? You remember that he's left-handed. So typically they're going to pat you down before you come in and see if you're carrying, packing anything. And you typically would put your sword on the inside thigh. And so if you're right-handed, you're going to put your little dagger, not your sword, but your dagger there so you can pull it out. And so apparently being left-handed, the text mentions specifically that he's left-handed. So apparently that was why they missed the sword, because they must have just patted one thigh down and not patted the other thigh down. You can imagine you wouldn't want to do the extended pat down. So he manages to get a knife in there, and then he makes his escape. Walton kind of describes it. It's a little maybe in our modern translations, I didn't reread it this time around. I didn't quite have enough time, but our modern translations, maybe it's a little harder to kind of know his escape. But Walton points out that he probably pulled the toilet off. You know, a king, it's a pretty unusual thing to have a toilet in your house, but he's the king, and so pulled the toilet off and went down through the latrine because there would have been like a janitor's closet below. You know, someone's got to clean up the poop, so it's kind of like an outhouse that's up on a platform. The poop falls down, janitor opens up the door, cleans the poop out, and you know, kind of a nasty job, clean up the king's poop. But so he escaped through there. I think the NIV maybe calls it a portico. I'm not sure what the NIV calls it, but
But he was, I mean, wasn't there like no mention of, I mean, it was just really, no mention of the Lord's work through him in a way like often in the records. I mean,
yeah, you know, there's, I mean, killing the king of Moab, you know, may have been a God-honoring thing. You know, he's providing deliverance for the people. Moab had become the oppressors of Israel. And so, yeah, there's no real talk of depending upon the Lord or anything like that. But, you know, being a leader and providing victory over Israel's enemies was a good thing. I think most commentators point out that there's a general decline in the judges as we go on. Of course, I'm sure you guys have picked up by now that, you know, there's this cycle in Judges of the people sinning, and the Lord sends oppressors against the people as punishment, and then the people cry out to the Lord, and then the Lord raises up a deliverer in the form of a judge who provides deliverance for his people. But, you know, the common theme throughout Judges is there's no king in the land. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. It's preparing us for the monarchy. You know, we're ready to accept a king when we see how bad Judges is. So it's preparing us for a monarchy, but showing us too just how wicked people are. And so it's the cycle that's happening, but it's kind of a downward cycle. Each successive judge becomes worse in some way. You know, Deborah, there's no real negative about her, except that, you know, should have been a man who was providing the deliverance, and now we've got a woman in that position. Gideon does lots of awesome things, but he gives way to idolatry. Leads the people on idolatry with this ephod that he makes. And, Jephthah, of course, is dumb. Samson, you know, all kinds of boneheaded things. So,
You know, I was wondering the same thing, because I think I read that in the intro. I was wondering about Ehud. Is he doing this of his own will, or I think I was wondering that. But anyways, because it says specifically of others, you know, the Holy Spirit, clothed with the Holy Spirit. Gideon was clothed with the Holy Spirit.
sure.
And it doesn't say that, but it does say in 3:15, then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord, and the Lord raised up for them a deliverer, Ehud, the son of Gera, or Jerah, or whatever.
Yeah.
So it does say he was from the Lord. You know what I mean? That this was from God. It's evidenced by the fact that he got away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Join the chewing fellowship.
Yeah, we're not given a lot of clues on that. It doesn't seem like, but yeah.
Benjaminite.
Yeah, it was cool how it came up later on. The Benjaminites had like a whole army of left-handed people.
Yeah, they were known for being left-handed. They must have. Maybe there's something genetic or just trained, you know, to be ambidextrous. It's advantageous in war if you're just like in baseball.
Boxing.
Yeah, to be left-handed.
Ever seen The Princess Bride? I have a secret. I am not left-handed.
I do.
I wonder if Paul was left-handed. I don't know.
All right, let's go through the characters in Deborah's famous battle. You guys remember this one probably? A little bit about it? Who was the commander of Israel's army? Yeah. Nice work. Who is the king of Canaan? Which I spelled wrong. All kinds of typos. You guys catch that, or you see it in the text now? His name's Jabin. Doesn't really get mentioned too many times, so it's a little tougher to remember. Jabin. How about the commander of the Canaanite army? That's cool. It's Sisera. And then who's the woman who killed the commander of the Canaanite army? Yeah, also Sean Mushkin's daughter's name.
You know, I told him this when we went to the bedtime thing. We were this close to naming Scarlet that.
No
I was
kidding.
studying the story.
Really?
We had like Scarlet in jail, and I was debating on how to pronounce it, whether to say Yael because it's more correct.
Yeah.
All this stuff, I'm like, but I went with Scarlet. That's like because everybody's gonna get her name wrong and all this stuff. So.
Yeah, that's the hard part about that name. Jael. It's just JL is I think how they pronounce it. Is that how you guys would have said it? Just JL?
Well, yeah, I mean in our context or jail's how I always just say it. But
Yeah.
you could say Jael but technically I think it's more like Yael.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Technically, but
Which we do anglicize a lot of things. I mean, Elijah rather than Elijah. But yeah. Yeah. So, how about the pronunciation of what word was used as a test to see if a person was an Ephraimite or not? This was the Gileadites that were warring against the Ephraimites, and they're crossing. I think they were crossing one of the rivers. And the Gileadites would kill. I think it's the Gileadites that were the killers, right? Kill the Ephraimites. This is I didn't have a scripture reference for it. Not as prepared as I should have been, but it was Shibboleth was the word they used, which it's in chapter 12. The Gileadites captured the fords of the Jordan against the Ephraimites. And when any of the fugitives of Ephraim said, "Let me go over," the men of Gilead said to them, "Are you an Ephraimite?" When he said no, they said to him, "Then say Shibboleth." And he said, "Sibboleth," for he could not pronounce it right. Then they seized him and slaughtered him at the fords of the Jordan. At that time, 42,000 of the Ephraimites fell. Jephthah judged Israel 6 years. Then Jephthah the Gileadite died and was buried in his city in Gilead. So Jephthah was a Gileadite in these leading them in this battle against the Ephraimites. So sometimes it's a fun one to know just because sometimes this is a secular reference. You know, people will talk about Shibboleth. This is where it comes from.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, you know, you're from the South or something, and you can't say certain words. I struggle with that. You know, my mom being a Southerner, certain words I don't say right. All right, and then we get this weird and terrible story about a man and his mom who made a shrine in the man's home and established a priesthood. What was the priest's name? And whose grandson was he? This is an interesting one that I didn't know until I reread it again. All the times I've read it, I haven't really caught this. But...
The man was Micah, right?
Yeah, the Micah, yep, was the priest.
He was the guy.
Wait. Micah was the
the guy, right?
That made the shrine.
10 shekels in a shirt.
Let me make sure I get this right again.
Yeah, it is.
We are in chapter 17. Yeah, so Micah makes the shrine, and then the priest's name is Jonathan, and he is the grandson of Moses in chapter 18, verse 30. The son of Gershom, son of Moses. We know Gershom. Remember that was Moses' son. So grandson of Moses becomes a priest in this really errant, abhorrent false worship.
What was his name?
Jonathan,
Oh, yeah.
son of Moses. Yep. And Micah was the one that made the priesthood, made the shrine. And then the Danites come and steal it all away. And this man becomes the Danites' false worship. Says his sons were priests to the tribe of the Danites until the day of the captivity of the land. So they set up Micah's carved image that he made, as long as the house of God was at Shiloh. Shiloh's where the tabernacle came to rest, by the way. You probably picked up on that.
Which is also where what happened?
Shiloh?
I thought there was also something that happened there before that where the tabernacle was going to ultimately be.
I don't know.
I think you're.
Getting that confused with something else.
Yeah, no, you probably have it right.
Isn't it Jerusalem? And we'll talk about where Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac. Like that was, people think it was Jerusalem.
Yeah, Mount Moriah outside of Jerusalem. Yeah, is that what you're thinking of?
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah. Yep. Abraham sacrificed or attempted to sacrifice Isaac at Mount Moriah, and then David, after he made his sinful census, makes his sacrifice. But he first buys the field from Araunah, the threshing floor, which was where Mount Moriah was, and he builds an altar there, makes his sacrifice, and that becomes the temple. Shiloh is where the when we get into 1 Samuel next week, that's where Eli's serving as a priest. That's where Samuel becomes a priest. And the tabernacle came to rest at Shiloh and apparently became a permanent structure, so much so that it gets called a temple. The Philistines are going to destroy it, when they raise it to the ground. But Shiloh's an important town. The location gets mentioned in Scripture lots of times as a word of judgment. In what city and tribe was the Levite man's concubine abused and killed? This is Gibeah of Benjamin. And why that's important? What important person was from Gibeah of Benjamin? Saul. Yeah. So there's a pretty clear sort of pro-David, anti-Saul theme that kind of goes, through Judges and.
They call it that later, Gibeah of Saul or Gibeah.
Yeah, Gibeah. Yeah. So you were kind of getting prepped for Benjamin. They're kind of a squirrely tribe that doesn't always do what's right. Of course, they're the Israelites kick a lot of tail against the tribe of Benjamin, and they agree that they won't let the tribe of Benjamin marry any of their wives, and so then they find this town. They find this town that didn't send anybody. It's Jabesh Gilead is the town. Didn't send anybody to fight against the Benjaminites, and so they kill the men and send their women to the Benjaminites because they kind of have mercy on them. They don't want them to be extinguished as a tribe, and so they're trying to provide wives for them without them actually breaking their vow of not giving wives to them. And of course, this is the book of Judges, and so everything they're doing is wonky and wrong. Then they steal a bunch of women at Shiloh at this feast. They tell the folks from Benjamin to take these women with their feast. And Jabesh Gilead is going to be significant too. because they're a pro-Saul group. Saul in 1 Samuel is going to provide deliverance to the Jabesh Gileadites when the Ammonites are threatening to kill them, and then it says, well, we'll make a deal with you. We'll poke out everybody's eye, and instead, and they're like, oh, let us think about it, and then they tell Saul, and Saul, that's when Saul, the Spirit comes upon Saul, and he kind of becomes a king in fact, not just in theory, and he provides deliverance for them, and then the residents of Jabesh Gilead, when Saul dies, when he gets killed, these folks go and rescue Saul's body and the body of Saul's sons and give them proper burial. And so they were loyal to Saul, and Saul had delivered them. So they factor in lots of different things. And we've got 7 minutes, so we'll go to Ruth real quick. Jackson's got all this nailed because we covered this in the high school group. This one's pretty easy. We can get through Ruth fast. All right, we know Naomi, of course.
Naomi's Dawn's.
What's that?
Naomi's.
Oh man, I'm such a dork. Sons. Yeah. Who was Naomi's husband? Anybody remember that?
Elimelech.
Yeah, Elimelech. How about his sons? You have it, Trent?
I don't.
Jackson, remember? It's Mahlon, Mahlon, and Chilion, Chilion. I believe it's Chilion. How do you spell it? And how about Naomi's daughters-in-law? My wife always corrects me if I say daughter-in-laws, because it should be, the plural should be on the daughters.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, of course, you know the one, right? Ruth, yep. Who's the other daughter-in-law?
Orpah.
Yeah, Orpah. Which I've always heard that, I shouldn't say always heard, but we talked about this in the high school group too, that Oprah was named after Orpah, but they, that's what I've heard.
Probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Orpah isn't the coolest name I've ever heard.
How about Ruth's new husband that she marries? You guys know it, right? Boaz. All right. Who was Ruth's son?
Jesse? No.
Not yet. Obed, and then Jesse, and then David. Yeah. So there's lots of great themes throughout the book of Ruth, but one of them is, we're getting prepared for King David and seeing where he came from. Boaz, Obed, Jesse, David. Good to remember those guys. How many people do you think lived in Bethlehem? I know Jackson knows the answer. Anyone else want to take a stab?
I don't think it was many.
No. Take a stab, Trent.
120.
That's really close. 200.
Mm.
About Jericho, they say maybe had about 2,000. I mean, these aren't big towns. Jericho was a big town by those standards, but Bethlehem, small town, even though it was really significant. Didn't have any water spring in the town. That's why it was susceptible to drought. Ruth leaves Bethlehem and moves to Moab because of famine, drought. But then obviously comes back with the death of her sons. Remember what Naomi's name meant?
Yeah, she wanted to change it.
Yeah.
She wanted to change because she no longer.
Yeah, pleasant. Yep, you nailed it, Trent. Pleasant. Changed it to what then? Jackson? Mara, which means bitter. Yep. Call me Mara. So she's kind of cranky and grumpy. I guess we can give her a pass. She's endured a lot of suffering. But God had something different in store for her, had a good future for her. Just even when life's rough, we shouldn't give up on God. Kinsman Redeemer. We don't have much time, but just mention that this is, you guys maybe have picked up on by now, but this is someone who is designated in a family to fix things, like if land was sold outside of the family, the kinsman redeemer would, the hope would be that they would be able to redeem the land and bring it back into the family. Or, if there's legal matters that needed overseen, the kinsman redeemer. So, I think of it a little bit like an attorney or, a fixer, somebody who just designated to help in the family. Of course, we make connections to Jesus as our kinsman redeemer. But Boaz was a kinsman redeemer. Obviously, there's a closer kinsman redeemer who wants the land but doesn't want to take on the responsibility of a levirate type marriage of taking Ruth on. Next two questions I had on here. Guess the big thing is that intermarriage is never a racial thing. It was okay to marry people of other races, people from other nations even. The prohibition was about marrying people of different religions. And so if a person wanted to become an Israelite, if they wanted to take on, like Ruth did, take on Israel's God and the practices of Judaism, they were welcome to come into Israel. They were welcome to marry an Israelite. We see several different examples, even war brides. You think about God at times permitting or providing some groundwork for taking war brides. God, that wasn't a bad thing to marry and then someone from a different nation. Yeah, and then all these ladies had some shady circumstances with their sexuality, or their circumstances, and kind of get mentioned in Jesus' genealogy, and prepares people to accept Mary, who of course was upright and had integrity, but the birth of Jesus had some shady circumstances, not shady in the, of course, real sinful sense, but in people's minds. But like, look, David came from these women, and so Jesus can come from Mary. That shouldn't be too hard for you to imagine an unusual circumstance. Yeah, and foreigners, of course. Rahab and Ruth being in Jesus' genealogy. All right, it's 9:30. So class is officially dismissed, except should make sure everybody knows we're meeting on Monday next week, not Tuesday. Got it, Trent?
We'll see.
Zach, you know that we're meeting on Monday. That works for you?
Yep,
Cool.
Works good actually.
Awesome. Very good. Well, I'll let you guys go.
Cool. Thanks a lot, guys. See ya. Have a good night.
Let my people go.